Hi folks, this is a short video to help you with your homework here. This is example 6 from page 84 in our notes. Bear with me, I'm just going to do this one on my phone today. We have to determine the amplitude, period, and shifts for this graph and then write an equation for it. So it's backwards from what we were doing in class, where in class we were graphing the function. So this specifically asks for a cosine function. So if you remember, the graph of cosine, the cosine of 0 is 1. So cosine starts up and comes down. So if we sort of reverse our process for graphing, we can sort of box in and grab one cycle or one period of that graph. And that's going to really tell us the information that we need to know. So we need to find A, omega, phi, and B and put those into our equation. Remember that A is the amplitude. It's the height of the wave from the middle. Another way to think about that is the whole height divided by 2, right? So if the graph goes from 3 to 7, right, that's a distance of 4. Cut that in half, and you've got a distance of 2. So A is 2. Remember that the period is the length of time that it takes to complete one full cycle. So from this graph, we can just look at the picture. One full cycle happens from 0 to 2 pi. So the period of this graph, we can see, again, it's visual, is 2 pi. From that, we can find omega, right? Because the period is 2 pi over omega, which means in this case, omega has to be equal to 1. So we have A, we have omega, x is our variable. Let's see if there's any horizontal shift. So if we look back at our original cosine graph, on the y-axis it starts at its maximum and it comes down. Well, that's what this graph does, right? So this graph didn't get shifted left or right. So there's no horizontal shift, which means that phi is 0. But we can tell there's definitely a vertical shift, right? This graph is not vertically where this graph is. It definitely got shifted up. So if we think, one way to figure out the vertical shift is to think about the range. The range of cosine originally, the range of cosine of x is -1 to 1, right? But we know that we're stretching it by a factor of 2. So the amplitude turns that into a range of -2 to 2. But that's not where this graph has range, right? This graph goes from 3 to 7. So the range of this graph is from 3 to 7. Well, if our minimum was -2 and now it's 3, and our maximum was 2 and now it's 7, that's up 5, right? So B is 5. So we have the pieces that we need and we can fill them in, right? So our equation is f of x equals 2 times the cosine of omega times x, which is just 1 times x, plus 0. So that's just 2 times the cosine of x, plus 5. And if we wanted to check, we could take a couple points from the graph and we could plug them in, right? So this should help you with this homework problem. In class, we'll talk more about how there could be other equations that match this graph, but this is one equation that matches that graph.